Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning in again today to one of our talks. Today we are joined by the wonderful M.J. Bassett, who's an incredible writer, director, and producer in the film industry, and has the upcoming film Rogue, which is a really incredible South African-UK co-production starring Megan Fox that is coming out via Lionsgate soon. So definitely check out the details of the release in the video description below. And I wanted to start by asking you about how this all came out, because I know that your producing partner, Molly Hassel, originally came to you saying, I have a bit of a budget for an environmental piece. And you obviously had started as an environmental host on television in the UK, so had a vested interest in, and I was just really interested in the intersection of your two worlds colliding with this particular project.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. It was a long time coming for me. So as you said, I started as I wanted to be a vet when I was young in the UK. I was a vet's assistant. I worked in zoos. I worked on farms. I ran a wildlife hospital. I was the youngest person ever in the UK to be licensed to run a wildlife hospital. And then I trained as a wildlife filmmaker for a few years before moving on to hosting TV shows in England as a naturalist and environmentalist. And this was in the late 80s, early 90s. And so, but then I kind of got sidetracked into making movies, because I always loved movies like genre films. I grew up in the kind of 80s and early 90s, where genre was really exploding, and those are the movies I love to go and see. So I kind of got diverted down that route to become a filmmaker. And it's taken all this time, a good 20 years, to find a project where I can bring the two things I really love together, blowing shit up and saving the planet. And then when Molly came to me and said, listen, I've got this budget, it's not very much. We're thinking we can find some first-time filmmakers and we can kind of godmother them through to make a movie with an environmental theme. Would you be interested in executive producing? And I said, no, I want to make that. Why would I not want to make that? She said, well, there's no money, you won't get paid very much. And I've never really been motivated by money, much to the disappointment of my agents. I just like to do what I do. And I thought, this is great. I said, the one thing, I don't want money, but I do want creative freedom. You know, I don't, just leave me alone to make the films. And Molly's fantastic in that way. And to be honest, Lionsgate and Capstone, who the financing partners, just sort of said, yeah, get on with it. What do you want to do? I said, I want to make an action movie. Great, love an action movie. So the theme's going to be, the underlying message will be about lion farming in Southern Africa, which is this big issue right now, where around 12,000 lions are on farms across the country right now, being bred for their bones, their fur, their body parts. The male lions are used for canned hunting. The cubs are used for the tourist industry. And I wanted to kind of have a little say about something about that wrapped around this kind of hostage rescue drama. So called my daughter, who's a writer. She'd written a couple of her own scripts. I said, I got this idea. Would you be interested in co-writing it with me? And she said, yeah, right. You know, working with the kids. We did a draft. It was pretty good. I polished it up. We got it ready for production. Went out to Megan Fox. And then it happened.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's so interesting about the way that you and your daughter Isabel crafted that plotline is that it's, you know, like you were saying, it's not just a human antagonist. There is the animal side of things as well, and that kind of undercurrent narrative. So when the two of you were writing the script, was there kind of a process where you thought about the balance between those two different ways and how you were going to pull them into the narrative structure to really create that tension?
Well, putting the movie together was, so there's structurally, I mean, because I like my action stuff, I wanted to start with a bang. And I mean, you've seen the movie, so the first 25 minutes of the movie is kind of relentless, pure action and adrenaline. And I sort of wanted to make the audience as exhausted as the characters would be. Yeah. You know, by the time that rescue mission has gone horribly wrong and they've managed to get away from the bad guys, it's like, oh my God, just take a breath. And that's what the movie does as well. But then with the lioness, it was very important to me that she's not a monster. This isn't a monster movie. This is a movie about animal behavior to a certain extent. I mean, what we're doing for them is terrible. And I sort of a spoiler alert problem really for this is that she has a reason she stays, the lioness. She has a reason why she does what she does. And it was always something which was, I think in the early first Jurassic Park movie, Alan Grant says, like, they're just animals. They just do what they do. And really, that's what the lioness is doing. She's protecting something that's important to her. So I got a lot of pushback saying, can you make it a lion with the fur and everything and the bigger? I said, no, that's not the point. The point of the movie is it's about maternal instinct. So you have the notion of Megan Fox's story, her character Samantha O'Hara leads this group of mercenaries who are supposed to rescue these girls. And Sam's character is somebody who has been, her femininity and her maternal instincts have been very much smothered by the business of being a soldier. You know, and I know a few female soldiers. I've worked quite a lot with veterans and military people. And women, especially in the military, sort of have to conform to quite a masculine way of being in the world. There's some beautiful feminine Marines I know, but at the end of the day, they're still in a super hyper masculine environment. And some of those natural feminine aspects are not allowed to come through. And I wanted to make sure that, so Sam's character, Megan's character, Sam, kind of goes on this journey to realize that you can be an absolute badass and also be feminine and be maternal and allow and not be ashamed of those feelings. And it's very telling in the movie that to begin with, it's the guys who care. You know, they're the ones who say, we've got to rescue these extra girls. And Megan's like, no, this isn't what we're getting paid for. So it's making sure that her journey to maternity sort of is reflected in the lioness's journey of protecting what's valuable to her as well. You know, also knowing that you can't really work with lions, right? They don't act. So the choice was to use mostly a CG lion, which, you know, I mean, I'd rather have not, but the truth is that that's how the movie had to get made. We had lions on the set at the beginning of the production, and they're dangerous. You know, they're wonderful, and I've worked with lions before. They're incredible creatures to be around. They're so charismatic, but you don't want an actor and a lion in the same shot. You really don't.
Yeah, I also noticed in the film credits that there's puppeteers that you were using as well. So did you have puppet versions of the lions as well for any of that, or where were they kind of coming into play?
So the puppet version, so the idea was going to be that we use real lions for the kind of broadly wide shots, puppet lines for the big close-ups where you see teeth and like this actual physical hard interaction, and that a digital lion would do all the acting. The puppet wasn't quite ready for the first day of shooting, so that was a bit of a problem. But was finally came into play towards the end of the shoot. And yeah, so my friend who was the puppeteer, who's a very skilled guy, would just basically get into this big lion head and attack the actors. It's great. I mean, and really fit, and they're big, powerful actors, some of these guys, and they were fighting these things off. And what you get is a sort of physical crunch that you can't get with CG. You know, and I'm there with bottles of blood, throwing blood on everybody, and because that's what I love to do, you know. So yeah, so there's the combination. At the beginning of the movie, it's real lions, and then we segue into CG, and then some puppet work as well.
Yeah, and I know that you also had, you know, for authenticity with Megan's character, you had her doing some training with military personnel to ensure that everything was exactly the way that it would happen in an operation like that. And I was just really interested in hearing a little bit more about some of the specific training that she did, because she does such a fantastic job with those scenes in the movie.
Oh, I'm glad you like that. She did work very hard. I mean, first of all, I never expected to get Megan for the movie. It was supposed to be this little film that nobody really paid any attention to, that I got to do what I wanted to do. So when Megan wanted to be involved, you know, the script came in, everybody was like, this is a pretty good script. We didn't expect it to be this good. So maybe we can get like a name. Well, who, you know, I need a badass woman. Names came in, and then Megan's name was on the list, and everybody got super excited. And I'm like, I don't see Megan Fox doing this. I don't think she'd be interested. I don't see her persona is such that I just didn't see that for her. And then they said, well, meet, you know, do the thing, you know, do the schmoozing. So I went to meet her, and she's a lovely woman. She's thoughtful and considerate and very open. And by her own admission, she says her energy is quite young feminine, right? And I think she wanted to try and get away from that a little bit and be perceived differently. So I said, well, you know, you've got to be a badass, and you've got to be able to move and carry a weapon and just have a hardness about you, which is not really inherent to her at all, but it is called acting. So I guess she felt she could try it, you know. But the first thing to do is make her comfortable with the military aspect, because, you know, I have a bunch of guys in this movie who I've worked with before. Philip Winchester, who did the show called Strike Back with me for years and years and years, is one of the most military capable actors I've ever seen. A couple of the other guys have actually served as well. And so what you can't have is kind of this token woman at the head of this looking not credible. So it's very important. So I called a friend of mine who's an ex-Marine sniper in LA, called Steve Siepke, who's done advising on a lot of movies. I said, can you give me a few days with Megan? So we went to a police tactical training center, put some guns in her hand, and we taught her how to clear rooms, because as you move into a space and where you look, it's not, everyone gets obsessed about accuracy, or like I can went to the firing range. Well, it doesn't matter that you can shoot a target in a movie, because you're not really going to be hitting a target, right? What's important is how you behave with the kit, not just the weapon, but the full battle rattle. You know, you've got the webbing on, you've got the gear, the rigging, all. Weighs a lot. It makes you move differently. And most of the population don't move like soldiers and fighters. You know, there's a very particular bearing they have. There's a way they move, the way they look at the world. So I was trying to cram all that information into Megan in a very short space of time. I didn't have her for long, right? I had like 4 days of pre-training, and then she came to the set, and we kept on doing weapons drills, like jam clearing. Most of the time when you're firing guns, they jam all the time. So it's clearing jams, getting the bullet out of the chamber and making it look like in the middle of a firefight, you can smack out the mag, clear your weapon, put it back in again, keep going. Without and actually going, oh, my gun's jammed, can we stop? And most of them do that, but I want you to be able to, if your weapon's jammed, that's what really happens. So clear it, put another mag in, get the hell on with the firefight. And by the end of the day, Megan could do that. You know, she got a bit bruised and battered, and the guns are heavy, but to be fair to her, she completely stuck at it. And I think she looks pretty good.
Yeah, she does. And I wanted to ask you a little bit as well about the stunt team that you were working with, because you were working with local crews as well. And I love the video that you posted online of the end of one of the shoot days where they were all just jubilantly singing and dancing. So I'm interested in kind of the environment that crew in particular and the stunt team really brought to the entire process for you.
Well, I've shot in South Africa quite a lot. I've taken a few shows and movies down there before. It's maybe my favorite country in the world. I love Cape Town, I love Johannesburg, I love the people and the energy there. And one of the things about, and it's similar with Canada and New Zealand as well, they're sort of frontier places where the men and the women are a little tougher than than people like me, right? Regular workaday, soft individuals. So I know when I take a project to South Africa, I'm going to get proper committed stunt work. Then they're not as scared to get stuck in. So I'm going with Rogue. There's not like lots of stunt work in the traditional sense of jumping out of burning buildings and windows and things. It's more supervising the commitment of the actors. That's the important thing. So you protect them, because I push a lot on a set. I expect bruises and getting cut occasionally, and I barrel straight through that. And it's not for everybody. My style of filmmaking is really not for everybody at all. And I know very quickly whether you belong on my team or not. Right? So when I cast everybody else in Rogue, I kind of knew they'd been a bit battle-hardened with me already. Megan was going to be the wild card because, she's a Hollywood actress. But Megan's from Tennessee, right? She grew up tough. So she also knows how to play in that world. So that was okay. And then the thing to do is to have great stunt coordinators who don't allow me to do stupid things with my actors, right? So there's a responsibility. So when you've got firearms, they're very dangerous, right? So with glibly, I'm going, oh, bang, bang. It's not. A weapon is, whether it's a blank firing weapon or not, it's a very dangerous piece of kit. We're running over rough ground. We're chasing jeeps through the African bush. We're jumping off cliffs into rivers, so there's a lot of those sorts of things within this movie where if you're not paying attention, it could go wrong. But for me, as a filmmaker, one of the reasons I do these films is to go to these places. I want to have this rough and tumble experience. I'll be the first person in a river. I'll be the first person to do the jump. I'll be the first person to, show how to use the weapon. Because partly I'm just a show off and I like that stuff, right? I make the films for those reasons. A lot of directors like the prep and the script writing, and some like the editing, because then you shape your narrative. I like to do the thing, right? I'm thrilled by, waking up in the morning and go, oh, we're jumping in a river today. We're going to get swept down in the rapids. Love it, right? Not for everybody though. But yeah, as you say, a stunt team who can coordinate that and enjoy it is the best. I want my sets to be fun, right? I want people to turn up and have a good time. That's where you get the best work, right?
Absolutely. It's also so interesting the choices that you have to make for a film like this, particularly to keep the momentum and the pacing of the action moving forward in terms of camera placement, the way that you're moving the camera, following your characters, but also kind of making sure that you're giving enough space for the action to breathe in those moments that it needs. So I was really kind of just fascinated by the way that you make those choices and how you kind of essentially map out what that's visually going to look like in order to keep that pacing and that momentum at all times when you need it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about Rogue is that it sort of moves through several genres as well. I mean, it deliberately does, right? So it starts as a full-on action experience in the classic sense. You know, mercenaries, bad guys, extraction goes wrong, helicopter can't take them, they have to drive, shoot, run, escape. So that first 25 minutes is a very breathless, very handheld, very experiential approach to the story, right? I want you to be inside that experience, and sort of that's kind of where I want to keep you for most of the movie. But it moves from that breathless first 25 minutes into the middle sort of part of the story, which becomes a little more horror movie. It allows the characters to breathe. It takes us to a new place, and then it starts. Because I'm a genre fan and I grew up on horror movies, it plays with aliens, it plays with the thing, it plays with people trapped, not quite knowing what the enemy is, and then it plays with the pressure of that, and then it plays a little bit of Jurassic Park. You know, there's a whole sequence where my characters have to get a generator going in order to get there on the radio so they can call for help. Well, that's just like a mini version of a Jurassic Park story where they have to get through the Velociraptor thing, and Bob Peck gets killed by the clever girl. Right? So I'm happily going to lift a few of these things out because structurally they give me what I need, which is escalation and constantly putting problems in the way. So it grows from script always. So it's like, okay, we've got these characters into this place. What have they got to do? Now they've got to survive. So great, take all their ammunition away from them. So suddenly we're not the super predator anymore. We're just part of the food chain. You know, one of the characters says, surprised me we got out of Africa in the first place, right? Because humans on their own are super vulnerable, right? Anything can eat us. So it was that. So it's like, take away their ammunition, take away their communication, take away power, so they're in darkness. So do all of these things to them, and then they have to find solutions to their problems. And then they find out there's a bad thing around there. So the monster, which is my shark, my lion, you know, they're going to get picked off one by one. They have now, if they didn't have the problem of having to get the radio and get the power going, they could just stay in the building. So it's keeping those problems going all the way. So a lot of it is just puzzle box storytelling. And then, so I can move through certain kinds of camera technique as well within that. So I can say super handheld, then slow it down. Let's go to Steadicam. Let's go to tracks. Let's change the lenses up a little bit. So we're not quite so in their faces. We're not wide and close. We're a little bit more distant. So we're more observing the problems they have. And then we grow back into being with them again through the course of the story. So it allows me lots of techniques. The other great thing about the movie for me as a filmmaker was I shot it absolutely in sequence, right? Which I've never been able to do before. And I doubt I'll ever get to do it again. The nature of the locations was such, they're all very near to each other. So I was like, well, let's just start at the beginning. And then we can, what it allowed me to do as well is have the actors get in charge of their characters a little bit. So they can go, well, I don't have to worry about continuity. I can grow myself through this piece. The downside of that is, as you're killing characters, your cast gets smaller and smaller. So all the fun people are leaving. So at the end of the day, it's just a few people standing around.
Yeah. Well, with that character development too, one of the interesting aspects in the film as well is the costumes, because it's not like Megan Fox is actually changing outfits 10 times in the movie. She's really wearing the same outfit the entire time, as is everybody, but you have all the different levels of distress based on the experience that they've gone through and what they've been facing. So I imagine that there was still a lot of detail and a lot of meticulous attention that had to go into the costumes.
It's pretty meticulous. That's right. I mean, well, again, so there's a couple of things going into this. One is that it's a low budget movie. It was always going to be a low budget movie. So the criteria for that is not many locations, not much cast, not lots of costume. You know, it's like there's certain things you can do when you're making a smaller budget film to make your life easier, to allow you to put the stuff on the screen and not do lots of, you know, unit moves and things like that. So With the costumes, you're absolutely right. It's pick the costumes, stay in the costumes, pull the costumes to pieces. Again, because I was doing in sequence, if I splashed blood on something, it could stay there, right? I didn't have to go and clean it up, and it was, oh, great. Or this got torn in a scene. Fine, leave it torn. That's great. That's natural progression, natural distress. So it looks good, and it makes life easier.
Yeah. And because you were touching a little bit about all the different forces that your characters are facing and those different beats throughout the film, did you have a way in which you would step back when you were writing the script to just think about how much can we throw at them that's going to really heighten the drama but still maintain believability? Were there any points at which you thought about throwing other things at them and you just kind of went, oh, that's actually maybe taking it a little bit too far?
It's yes, always, yeah, yes, throw everything, right? Some of it's to do with, again, it's to do with what you can afford to do on the schedule you've got. So I shot this movie in 21 days, right? Wow. So it's a short schedule. So I know how quickly I can work. So I've done a lot of television, and television makes you work quickly, right? So you have a big page count, you've got lots to do. And I'm pretty good at blocking action. I'm pretty good at making all that stuff happen. I've got experience and bringing a team with me who know that as well. So I know what I can get through in a day. I will always throw more things. I always write more elaborately than I can probably achieve. And then there's a point where, as you say, you move beyond the realms of believability. I mean, any movie sort of hovers at the edge of credibility anyway. It has to, because real life is very boring, and I don't want to watch real life movies. Even military movies, any soldier will tell you it's mostly boring with very short bursts of intense action, right? And that just doesn't work in a cinematic environment unless you're making a kind of pseudo-documentary. For me, I'm making genre movies that exist in that action space. So yeah, there was an initial idea, there was going to be more than one lion. It was going to be an original idea. They were going to kill one. There was going to be a sequence where they managed to pin one down and they kill it. And they're like, okay, good, we're safe. And then boom, another lion was going to turn up. And I took that out because I couldn't really afford to do it properly. But more than anything, I didn't want them killing a lion, right? I didn't want that to be the case because I felt, because she's not a monster, she's not an alien, she's not a creature, she's a thing with a motivation to protect what she cares about. So, and I'm giving too much shit away, so if you haven't seen the movie, I'm sorry. It's like there are things like that, and I know there were bigger things for the Jeep chase, and you know, I couldn't get, I wanted a real jump off the cliff, for instance, which I couldn't do for safety reasons. You know, finding a river in Africa that's deep enough to jump into is an issue, right? They run quite shallow. Right? And then you have to have water that's clean enough. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here now, but like finding a river in Africa where the water is clean enough to go into, where people, I shot about 3 or 4 years ago with Philip Winchester, I shot a whole gunboat sequence on a river outside Durban. Jungle river sequence with machine guns and bullets and ships, things were exploding. And he and I and a couple of the other cast members spent days and days in this river, literally just swimming in this river. And we all got so sick. Yeah, just running into the bushes between setups, doing what we had to do in the bushes, coming back, getting on with our work. And nobody really wanted to do that again, which I think is fair.
I think that's a reasonable request.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can be a reasonable person.
Yeah. Well, in terms of some of the other logistics beyond the river water, in terms of shooting on location in South Africa, and I love, you know, how you're actually very experienced in shooting in that space. I was interested as well in some of the other logistical challenges, just in terms of the heat that you're facing and just elements like the dust, which I imagine means you have to be really careful in specific ways with the cameras as well.
Yes, so we shot this movie about 40 minutes outside of Johannesburg, a place called the Cradle of Humankind, which is, for me as a naturalist and somebody who loves the natural world, it's an incredible place to shoot. There's a farm called Glen Afrique, which we sort of basically took over the whole place. And there are giraffes wandering around and zebras and wildebeest. There are jackals living in the hills. And when the sun was setting, you'd hear these jackals howling around the hills. So it's an amazing place to shoot. It's pretty rigorous to shoot there. So yeah, lots of dust. So you have to be careful about that. And it's very fine dust. It gets inside the lenses, gets on the sensors. So you have to have a camera team who are very aware of that. Now, of course, South African camera operators know their environment. and they know how to protect it. So that's the good thing about you always using local talent as far as you can for the crew, because they know their world. And then you have, I mean, yes, it was very hot during the day, but 2 weeks of this movie was night shoots. So that was hard for us because we moved from the first part of the movie was a daytime sequence, and then it all takes place during one night. So the hardest thing was just adjusting your clock and just keeping the energy and momentum going. This particular part of the Johannesburg landscape, the hills where we're shooting are rich in iron. They're ferrite hillsides, and they just draw down lightning. So every night we have these incredibly intense lightning storms, just smashing into the hillside around us. And of course, you have to take the crew inside. You can't have your lights up on there because we only had, again, we used a camera. We used the Sony Venice, which is a very, very good camera for nighttime. Don't need so many lights, but you still had to put on these big cherry pickers. And of course, normally they're manned. There's somebody up on there just keeping them safe. But then the winds would come in, the lightning would start. We'd have to lower the booms, come inside, shoot. You know, there are sequences in the movie where I'm shooting in a barn, and the entire crew, like 50 people, is actually just behind the camera because it's the only thing we can shoot because there's a storm outside. Right? So you have to be kind of nimble as well in these circumstances. So that's a big safety thing. We weren't plagued by snakes or spiders or anything like that. That was pretty good. And I have this brief for my crews. Anyway, if you find anything interesting, come and tell me. So very frequently, the show was shut down for a minute while I go and see an interesting beetle or some creature they've found. Because I have bugs of rogue. I have this folder on my phone of photographs of bugs of rogue. Huge rhinoceros beetles and things are fascinating. I love that stuff. Again, it's the reason I go there. So there's safety issues always. There's practical issues like the ground is strewn with boulders. So somebody's got to do a run. It's not as simple as just running from A to B. It's clear out some boulders, make sure nobody's going to hurt their ankles. When I say hit the ground and roll, it's like it's not as simple as that. It's padding everybody up, making sure there's not something dangerous on the way. Lots of plants in Africa want to hurt you. Thorns everywhere. And acacias and things like that. But what it does to it adds a certain sense of just a frizzen of danger. Not enough to be bad, but absolutely enough for everyone to pay attention and to remove the layer of acting because you're in the real space. And that's the most important thing. Is I've done it through my very first movie. My first film was this a horror movie set in the trenches of World War I called Death Watch. It's about 20 years old now, and it had Andy Serkis and Jamie Bell and Matthew Rhys, very good cast. But I shot that we dug real trenches just outside Prague, and I would rain about 60,000 litres of cold water a day onto this set. We were shooting in the middle of winter, so it would freeze. It would literally freeze on the actors, and you could see them moving. The ice would break off their costumes, right? And it was a terrible experience. But what they would say is like, there's no acting required. The difficulty is just remembering your lines. And to me, that brought a veracity and an intensity to everything that I try to carry with me, which I guess is why I like shooting on location so much.
Yeah, and it's such a
really long answer. I can't remember what the question was now, but that was a really long answer to something.
No, I love it. It was all about shooting on location in South Africa, so it was perfect. And then, you know, I don't think this is not a spoiler piece that I wanted to ask you about in terms of the end of the film, but right before the credits, you do kind of bring up a screen card that talks about animal conservation and some of the facts with that. And I just wanted to know kind of like what you hope the messages the audiences really take away from how you've used this narrative story to really capture that and to tell that story.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the film exists in a way for the end card. I mean, that's the whole point of making this movie for me, was to hope people have enjoyed themselves enough to sort of hang around for 10 seconds after the movie finishes to read this thing about these 12,000 lions plus being farmed for their body parts and for the traditional medicine industry. And I just thought, if I can get just some people to be even aware that this is a problem. You know, there are so many environmental problems, and hopefully the movies I make from now on will all touch on those. But this is something I'd come across, and I felt very passionate that it's just another wrong thing we're doing. And I could make a documentary about this, and I could have made the movie a much more literal exploration of lion farming. But I also thought, well, people who are already interested in that will watch those. I don't need them. I need the people who don't know anything about it. People who maybe don't care about it too much. just to make them aware that this is another one of the incredible litany of terrible things we're doing to the animals on our planet. You know, we'll continue to have issues with what we're doing to the natural world, and I think we just need to feel a bit more responsible. So if this movie can do anything just to move that needle, then its job is done.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for talking so in depth about this. This was so wonderful.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.